So, Joseph, yeah, stage is yours.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Very happy that you joined and you find the time to listen to our presentation today. So, can I share the screen, Nebojša? Thank you. Okay. Cool. So you should be able to see my screen. So one of the topics we want to cover today, together with Andre, is a general overview of certain GFI products. So we decided that some of the products will be presented by Andre, and some of the products will be presented by me. So those which are green will be presented by me, and the remaining will be covered later on by Andre. So I will walk you through GFI LanGuard, GFI HelpDesk, Exinda SD-WAN, GFI FaxMaker, and Exinda Network Orchestrator. So I do understand that there are quite few products to cover, and there will be a lot of information to digest. So I will try to make it brief per product, try to highlight the most important aspects of the product, use cases of the product, and advantages comparing to the competition which is out there. After I'll be finished, then we will simply continue with other products. So the first one is the GFI FaxMaker. When I'm presenting GFI FaxMaker to our partners, then in most cases, the reaction is a little bit confused, because everyone, when you hear fax or faxing, everyone thinks that, okay, that's technology from the last century and likely being used in the US, and everyone will picture the big fax machines and tons of paper, which is true. I mean, I'm sorry? I'm not sure if that was a question. If you have questions, of course, feel free to ask or use the Q&A button in the Zoom, and we will be happy to answer any questions. So back to the FaxMaker. So what I mentioned is all true. I mean, this is how the faxing started in the beginning. And right now, the faxing is in 21st century, which requires a little bit different approach. The different approach from a perspective that you no longer need a huge, expensive fax machine, and you don't need to deal with difficult faxing. And this is exactly addressed by the FaxMaker. FaxMaker literally makes the faxing as easy as the sending of an email. So it really brings the technology in the 21st century, and it's adapted towards the user to make it user-friendly and use the already existing business vehicle, which is the email. The need of faxing is still there across different countries in Europe. The reason why is because in some countries, the faxing or the faxes are still considered as the most secured way of communication. So for example, in healthcare or in insurance or in military, a certain type of information is simply prohibited to being sent over an email. We all know that email is, well, it could be hacked, it could be, you can act like a man in the middle, etc., etc. So email is not considered as the safest transaction. Faxing is. So GFI FaxMaker is able to address all of that. It doesn't have any user restrictions, so it can fit pretty much any environment. It can work for SMB, it can work for enterprise. The main features are, as I mentioned, you can just send and receive faxes as an email. So it works in a way that you write an email, put a specific email address, which is the address of the FaxMaker, you add the faxing number, and the email goes from the mail system to the FaxMaker, which transition it into a faxing telecommunication, and it's being sent to the destination. It has an integration with Active Directory, which makes the user authentication very simple. You can take advantage of the automated routing of the incoming faxes. This means that you can always decide where the fax will be received. If the fax will be received on your email, in the folder, on the printer, you are in control. You can exactly define where the fax from who will be actually received. And finally, it has a very strong reporting function, which goes hand in hand with the strong compliance aspect of the product. As I mentioned previously, faxing is mandatory in certain areas, such as healthcare. And of course, if you are using the faxing to stay secure and to have secure communication, you also need to have a very strong reporting to support that. When it comes to the competition, there is, for example, WriteFax, BetaFax, ZetaFax, ActFax, and pretty much everyone who has fax in the name. Our advantage is it's highly scalable for a low cost. So we can really go from few users up to 700 users or few thousand users. It's absolutely fine. Easy and fast integration with CRM, MFPs, or ERP systems. Pretty much fits any telephone infrastructure, so it doesn't matter if you have an analog card, if you are using fax over IP, or you want to use the cloud services. So we can meet your requirement. So the vehicle for the sending of the faxes is very dynamic, and you can choose whatever. And finally, flexible deployment. So you can deploy on Windows Workstation, or you can use the Windows Server operating system. So what are the typical use cases for a GFI FaxMaker? As mentioned previously, it is essential for regulated industries, such as the healthcare, legal, government, manufacturing, etc., etc. If you, for example, or your business or your customers are making business with the US-based or German-based companies, then they probably are already using faxes. Because with these countries, the faxing is pretty much the reality still. Increase productivity. So if the company is still using faxing and they are using the old faxing with the big faxing machines, then you know that it takes a lot of time to actually go there, to scan it, to send it, etc., etc. So really changing the mindset into using the GFI FaxMaker and sending faxing through an email can positively influence the employee productivity. Then, of course, replacing the fax machines, so making it more cost-effective. Integrate faxing with an existing mail system. So, yeah, GFI FaxMaker can work with Microsoft Exchange, with Carrier Connect, with Office 365, with Google, with pretty much any mail server. So that was all from the fax perspective. Now I'll jump into vulnerabilities. So the vulnerabilities, you can find basically vulnerabilities in any product, right? You can find the vulnerabilities on your laptop. You can find vulnerabilities in your cell phone, on your server, in your application. There are two questions which we need to ask. Who knows about this vulnerability? If those vulnerabilities have been discovered already. And the second question is if you are aware of that vulnerability. So we all remember, and I think Nebojša mentioned it in the beginning, the Log4j. So the Log4j happened in December last year, right? But the vulnerability itself existed in the system already before it became public. That's exactly the kind of a negative and positive thing about the vulnerabilities. We always need to make an assumption that the system is vulnerable. So from that perspective, we need to have a tool which is able to discover those vulnerabilities, because once the vulnerabilities are already publicly known, or hackers can read about the vulnerabilities and hackers can exactly target those vulnerabilities, in that case, we can say it's an armed. So a race in if the owner of the system is going to find the vulnerability and fix it, or the hacker is going to exploit that vulnerability and literally hack the owner of the business or the company. As you can see on the slides, the vulnerabilities could be literally across the entire system. The answer to vulnerabilities when it comes to the vendor reaction is the patching, right? So we all know that we have the Patch Tuesday, or simply other vendors are releasing the patches on weekly basis or monthly basis or quarterly basis, etc. But vendors are reacting to vulnerabilities with ease of patching. When it comes to patching, this exactly happens what you can see on the screen, right? The Windows or any other operating system makes a lovely pop-up saying you, hey, Mr. User, I have a new patch for you. Do you want to deploy? And then majority of users, what they do is they simply postpone. So they click on remind me later. And it's logical because these users, they don't see the importance of patching. They don't see the patch is actually resolving a vulnerability, which could lead into having a successful attack. And for example, to have a ransomware and pay a lot of money. So they don't see the full aspect of cybersecurity. And that is exactly the reason why the task of patching should be taken away from the end user. So someone else needs to be responsible for keeping all the system fully patched and up to date. Because the user simply, as you can also see on the screen, will always choose remind me later, because there is always an email he needs to finish, a call he needs to do, some important task. And everyone knows that once they will deploy the patches, they will reboot and they will not be able to work and they will need to wait 5, 10, 15 minutes, etc. So that's the reason why the end users should not be responsible for patching their own machine. In our portfolio, we have GFI LanGuard. The GFI LanGuard is a patch management and vulnerability assessment solution. So pretty much addressing everything which I mentioned so far regarding vulnerabilities and deploying of patches. The target audience for the GFI LanGuard is SME. The best fit for a single server of GFI LanGuard is for 3,000 nodes. You can of course have multiple servers and use the multi-server solution. The main features: network discovery. It will pretty much go through every single IP address, every single device in the network, and it will form so-called network tree. So you'll be able to see exactly what kind of devices are present in your infrastructure. It has essential patch management, so you don't need to keep the responsibility with the end user, with the operator or whoever is using the computer. You can take the responsibility from him and put it into an automated system. Vulnerability assessment. So before you are going to patch, of course, the LanGuard will be able to scan the devices and recognize the weak spots. So you'll be always at the top of the game, knowing about the latest vulnerabilities present in your system. And with this knowledge, you can also keep your system safe. And it has built-in compliance reporting. So it shows a very high value in generating the reports which can keep you compliant with ISO 27001, with Cybersecurity Act, with GILBA, or other compliance which are supported currently by the product. When it comes to the competition, you can find Manage Engine, Ivanti, SolarWinds, WSAS. Our advantages is that we have a vulnerability assessment which can cover pretty much any operating system and third-party applications plus network devices. So really high flavors which can be used in a single company or in a single network to address literally everything which is present. The same applies on the patch management. We are able to patch all Windows operating systems, major distribution versions of Linux, including Oracle Linux, Debian, Ubuntu, SUSE, OpenSUSE, CentOS, Red Hat, and Fedora. And of course, we are also able to patch third-party applications and Mac operating systems. Software audit and auto uninstallation. This is like the cherry on the top of the pie. So LanGuard is very heavy on the security, recognizing vulnerabilities and closing those vulnerabilities with patches. But sometimes that's not simply enough, because even when you have a legitimate application which is up to date and it's not vulnerable on its own, the nature of the application, how it could be actually used, could be considered as a vulnerability. And for that, the LanGuard can actually create a block list and uninstall those applications automatically if you choose them to be unwanted. So a good use case is, for example, TeamViewer. So in your organization, if you are using VPN, then TeamViewer will be pretty much a vulnerability, because it's you don't have the control. You don't know who is connecting from TeamViewer, etc., etc. So to uninstall that application could be a good solution to keep systems safe. And it can operate within the LAN without agents. So you don't need to deploy anything on the endpoints. So what are the use cases? So get visibility of the patching and vulnerability status of all the devices across the network. So simply do a cybersecurity audit and keep the security on the required level. Reduce the time gap between the vulnerability found and vulnerability closed with the patch deployment. And over here, I would like to explain a little bit more, because the gap between the vulnerability and the patch deployment is 68 days on average. So this means that after Log4j was publicly known to pretty much everyone, and everyone was scared about Log4j, on average, it took 68 days to patch it, even when the patch was already available. This is on the average. It's kind of a scary number, but this, of course, this number is taken from different companies when the patch is fully deployed across the environment. Track missing updates and deploy patches for multiple operating systems and third-party applications. Generate reports to demonstrate compliance. And finally, get comprehensive view of all the elements in the network, including connected USB devices, installed software, open shares, and more. So let's go to the next product, which will be also quite interesting. So if you think about internet and usage of internet, you can think of thousands and thousands of applications, right? And there are new applications coming, and the applications are changing, evolving, etc., etc. The best way how to understand what is happening in the internet is to look at your cell phone. So if I'll ask you right now, how many applications you have in your cell phone, you'll probably say around 100, because 100 is on average kind of the amount of applications users have in their cell phone. The next question will be, how many of those applications are you using? And in that case, the answer will be around 15 to 20 applications, right? This is on average what people are using in their cell phone. But all other applications are, of course, also consuming bandwidth. Bandwidth is not unlimited, right? You are paying maybe for 100 megabits, maybe you are paying for a gigabit. I don't know, but the bandwidth is not unlimited. So there is always a certain fixed value. And these applications, as you can see, are the most popular applications which are being used on internet, right? There are like 700,000 of hours of YouTube video being watched just in a single minute. Video on Vimeo, 16,000 videos watched, right? Messages being sent, email being sent. These numbers are huge, right? And my point over here is that it will continue to be so. But somewhere over there are also your business applications, maybe Office 365, maybe your email, maybe Zoom call, which we are having right now. And those applications which you are using to drive your business, those applications have to compete about all the rest applications which are there in your network, right? But sometimes, as I mentioned, the example with the cell phone, you simply are not aware of what applications are there, what applications are being used, and what applications are important. All of these things are being covered by Exinda Network Orchestrator. The Exinda Network Orchestrator is a WAN optimization, network control, and application performance tool. It can fit pretty much SMB, SME, or enterprise. It can go into the networks with up to 20 gigabits per second. The main features: application visibility, total application visibility, which is delivered natively without the need of decrypting. This means that nowadays we have majority of traffic is HTTPS, right? You know, Facebook, YouTube, everything is HTTPS. So Exinda can see those applications, but it doesn't need to decrypt the packets. So the communication will remain encrypted. It has advanced packet shaping. So once everything is discovered, once you know how many applications there are, how many are being used, when they are being used, who is using them, what is the consumption, after that you can control them. You can create very, very granular policies where you can control even the last kilobit of bandwidth available in your infrastructure. Has a TCP acceleration, so in case that you have the need to accelerate the traffic between two or multiple sites, the Exinda can deliver that. So it can basically virtually expand the available bandwidth depending on the traffic you are sending. And finally, it has the edge cache. The edge cache system is, or edge cache functionality is very common with the with proxy systems. So a lot of proxies, they have the edge cache as well. So Exinda has this as well, but in this case, it could be transparent. The competition, for example, Riverbed, Allot, Blue Code, Cinefa, Silverpeak. The advantage on our side is application performance scoring. So Exinda can exactly tell you which application is performing good or is performing bad. It's an excellent business tool when you are delivering services. So you can evaluate the performance of your service before a customer will complain or he will say that, okay, I'm not going to pay you for the service because I'm not satisfied. The performance of the service was not delivered. So you can have this advantage, or also the application performance score could be used internally. When your employees will approach you and say, hey, I can't work with it, it doesn't work. MS Teams is not working. And of course, if you're going to ask your employees what's not working, they will not be able to answer, right? Because they are not IT professionals. So with application performance scoring, you can see beyond, you can see exactly when there was a good call or a bad call through Microsoft Teams or other applications. Advanced application visibility. So Exinda is currently #1 on the market when it comes to native application visibility. It can recognize thousands and thousands of applications. The applications which are currently not in our database could be easily created by you, by the user. And the user can also define the application based on the SSL common name. So Exinda is able to read common names or the organization names from the headers. And it can use this information to natively provide visibility into HTTPS traffic. And finally, Exinda recommendation engine. If you see something, say something. This is exactly what the recommendation engine is doing. It's recognizing when there is something new in the network, when something changed in the network. When it comes to the use cases of the Exinda Network Orchestrator, there is definitely real-time monitoring, so you can visualize everything what is happening in the network. You can perform audits. You can prioritize the users, specific applications, websites, etc. So it's purely up to you what you're going to do and how your bandwidth is going to be utilized. You can ensure that business critical applications will always have the needed bandwidth to perform at their highest. Optimize bandwidth usage by controlling unsanctioned or unwanted traffic. And finally, provide full control for MSPs. So also a lot of MSPs are using Exinda. For example, if they are providing an internet connection to a building, and within the building, they have multiple smaller companies or let's say tenants. So they are able to allocate the bandwidth to those tenants based on certain criteria. The next product is still we are keeping within the Exinda, is the Exinda SD-WAN. It's a separate product and it's complementing the Exinda Network Orchestrator. So what it does, it's basically having an application visibility, virtual list line. It is able to do a native HTTP aggregation and has a firewall functionality. So in the nutshell, the competition is Riverbed, Cisco, Viptela, and other SD-WAN solutions. Our advantage is different types of VLLs. So you can, for example, have a VLL for VoIP traffic. This means that Exinda SD-WAN will send or will duplicate the VoIP packets through multiple links. At the destination, the duplicate packets will be dropped. But in case that there will be a packet drop in one of the links, then still the packet will be delivered through another link, basically resulting that your VoIP communication, MS Teams or Zoom, will be without any interruption, even when one of your internet connections will be unstable or literally unplugged. So it can simply keep and ensure the existence of the business traffic, pretty much depending on your needs. Or it can seamlessly route or load balance the traffic through the desired link based on certain criteria. built-in QoS, so you can control what is happening, more or less the same as the Exinda orchestrator, built-in VPN, and finally cloud-based relay. So when it comes to the use cases, you can combine and manage multiple internet transport. So you can basically get use of for what you are already paying. If you are paying for 2 internet links or 3 internet links, the SD-WAN will help you to leverage 100% out of that capability. You can avoid interruption, as I mentioned, with the VoIP traffic, so it can simply work without interruption. You can add additional bandwidth to the network if it's needed. This pretty much means that you can aggregate the links. So if you have 2 links, one is 5 meg, the other one is 5 meg, and you are making a download, then that download without an SD-WAN function will simply go always from a single link. That means that the throughput or the bandwidth available for the download will be 5 megs. But with SD-WAN, you can combine the 2 links together, and eventually it can provide you 10 meg experience. You can ensure application quality by guaranteeing the bandwidth and prioritizing the traffic. And, oh, sorry, I thought that there is one more. And yeah, that's it from Exinda SD-WAN. So now we'll jump into the GFI HelpDesk, and then I will give word to Andre. So GFI HelpDesk is basically an on-premise central ticket management system. It acts as a one-stop point of contact for all clients' queries. Of course, you can deploy the GFI HelpDesk in the cloud, so it's up to you whether you're going to deploy it, if it's an on-premise or if it's in the cloud. It's a support and knowledge-based system. It can fit SMBs, SMEs, and enterprises. The best fit from the amount of users are 50 agents. So agents are basically support technicians. So the guys who are going to resolve the query, resolve the ticket. When it comes to amount of customers who are submitting the ticket, in that case, there is no limitation. Main features: there is a customer-facing portal where the customers can add QB articles, they can read news, they can create tickets. Staff-facing portal where the staff, so the agents, can actually see the tickets, they can create or control the flow of the tickets, and yeah, they can assign them and simply work on them, create QB articles, create news feeds, etc. Email parser, because we all know that users are going to go through the easy way. And the easy way in this case is not to simply go to the portal and open a ticket. The easy way is to write an email. That is the most easiest thing. And to address that, the GFI HelpDesk has so-called email parser. The email parser is receiving emails, and it's looking at those emails and basically organizing them to which department or to which person they should go. If email is easy, then the chat is even more easier. So we all know, and in some e-shops you can find the icon to have a direct live chat with the person. You can ask the questions in real time, you can get the answers, and you can buy the product, or you can simply get the support. So for that perspective, GFI HelpDesk also is supporting the live chat. When it comes to competition, there is Jira, Zendesk, Atera, Zohodesk, Freshdesk, and others. Our advantage: multi-platform deployment. So you can deploy on Linux, you can deploy on Windows. With Linux, you can obviously cut some costs. Desktop application and mobile application. So you can control the tickets on the mobile or on the desktop. You don't need to necessarily go through the web UI. It has multi-language support. So you can pretty much create any language you want. By default, I think it supports around 18 languages, but really you can create your own one. It's just an XML, so you can just, go through the XML and make the translation and save it. That's it. And a high level of customization. So you can pretty much change the product to meet your business requirement. You can do the white labeling. You can take advantage of the API and add basically the functionality into your website or into a custom application or custom portal which you are or your users already using. When it comes to the use cases, then MSPs, of course, if you are an MSP, you know that SLAs are super important and you need to keep those SLAs. So the best way how to manage it is through a ticketing system. Organization with clients and branches across the globe. So, if certain organization simply gets too big, then the queries, the internal queries, the problems, etc., will need to be managed to basically make use of everyone's time. Business with decent volume of support service requests. And finally, e-shops that want to track their stock, sales, procurement, shipping, or just embedded the live chat functionality into their website. So that's pretty much it from my side. So if you will have any questions, then feel free to ask. And I'm giving words to Andre, who will then continue with presenting of the remaining products, GFI Archiver, GFI Mail Essentials, Carrier Connect, and Carrier Control.
Okay, thank you. As Joseph said, you can send your questions into the chat and we will have some time before we give a word to AST. So you should see my presentation now, and we will start with Carrier Control. The name doesn't really say it, but it's a firewall, of course. It's a next generation firewall, so it includes IPS, antivirus, web filter, a VPN server, and fairly newly, it includes also active-passive high availability, so you don't have any issues with outages. And the firewall, its basic functionality is, of course, the utilization of communication rules. You can, of course, name your communication rules, set up colors for them for easy identification. You select the source, the target, whatever ports or services will be used, IP version, and then you can set up your actions, whether to allow, deny, or drop the packets. You can also track traffic, whether by connections or by individual packets per each rule, or you can track it globally. Or you can, for example, just track all dropped packets in case you need to troubleshoot something. For the communication rules, you can also set up a time frame in which they will be applied. So, for example, during lunchtime, you can allow social media, but you can close them again when it's time to work. Next up, a very important part is IPS, or intrusion prevention system. It compares traffic signatures to a database of known attacks and threats and blocks it by severity. You can set up your own rules on which severity will be blocked or just locked or let through. And in case you get a false positive, of course, you can set up a whitelist. Then there's antivirus, which uses Bitdefender engine, and it will check all the files going through the firewall. It can also do checks on FTP, SMTP, and POP3. So it can be offloading a bit of the utilization of your mail server or anti-spam. Next up is web filter. There's quite a few options on how to filter communication based on the content. Of course, it's not the full Exinda network orchestration package, but for basic small and medium business needs, it's more than enough. It works, unlike Exinda, by decrypting the packets. So when you want to set up a web filter for HTTPS, you will need to distribute the firewall's certificate. But besides that, you can block either by domains, categories, or by file types. And again, just like with the communication rules, you can set up a time frame in which the rule will be applied. Another important part is the VPN server. It provides secure connection, whether that is for clients. So some of the customers' users might be working remotely or be on a business trip. connecting from an unsecured Wi-Fi. In that case, it's always better to use a VPN, and they can also use it to access internal servers, for example, with file shares, without those needed to be exposed to the internet. It has its own protocol, Carrier VPN, and you can also use IPsec for clients, but you can also set up tunnels with both of these, point-to-point over Ethernet, L2TP, and point-to-point transfer protocol. There's a variability of encryption methods you can use, and with IPsec you can use IKE and IKE-v2. As for high availability, there's active-passive options, and the use case is simply having two firewalls running at all times. Traffic gets routed through one of them, the main one, and if you have some outage due to hardware failure, or if you have to have any service downtime, installing new versions, doing some maintenance, then it will automatically be routed through the other firewall, and the customers won't really notice any difference. Besides the firewalls themselves being in high availability, you can also connect multiple internet links, which can be used either for load balancing, or they can be used as a failover. So you can have, for example, DSL connection, and if it fails, the firewall will switch over and route traffic through an LTE backup line. Next up is Carrier Connect. That's a mail server, but of course it's not just a mail server. It also includes an XMPP server for chat. You can use calendars, save contacts, and anything else you might expect. It's got its own antivirus, again by Bitdefender, anti-spam functionalities. You can use either Active Directory or Open Directory for authentication. You can also reinforce your security by using two-factor authentication. And one of the big advantages of Carrier Connect is that you can run it on Windows, Linux, or even Mac if you want. And you can even use a VMware appliance if that's your preferred setup. You can use either a distributed domain if you have a large environment, or again, fairly new is a multi-server functionality where you will have the roles of the mail server divided into multiple installations. So there will be one edge transport, one storage, for example, and they will split the load so you can support very big installations. As for licensing, it's licensed per mailbox, so there's no need to get separate license for aliases or distribution groups or anything like that. The clients can access either through webmail, IMAP, POP3, a native client, or an Outlook plugin. And of course, you can have active sync synchronization for mobile devices, or you can use IMAP in combination with WebDev and CallDev. There's also possible integration with Archiver and Mail Essentials, and those are the products that we will take a look at next. So first up is Archiver, and as the name suggests, it's a solution for email and file archivation. And you might ask, my mail server already has an archiving solution. Why do I need Archiver? It's fairly simple. You might want to either have a second copy of the emails, or you might want to have the option to recover deleted emails, or you just want to improve the performance of your mail server. So for the basic overview of Archiver, you have multiple options how to archive. You can either set up a journaling mailbox on your mail server that can be connected either through IMAP or EWS. You can have an Outlook plugin through which the users will archive themselves. And you also have an application for Windows that's called File Archive Assistant. and you can either archive individual files or set up sync for a folder. There's client access through web interface, Outlook plugin, or again, you can connect it as a second mailbox through IMAP. And it's built to use SQL database just to be able to search the archive quickly. It also uses DID application. So in case there's an attachment, it goes out to 7 different users. It will only be saved once and save you some disk space. And as for the system requirements, it just needs a database server connected and it runs on Windows. Only on Windows Server, I would note, because it needs Internet Information Services. And also it serves some clients. So in order not to breach Microsoft's licensing, it's better to always use server. So as I already shortly mentioned, the main advantages of using Archiver are faster search times, less data kept on mail server, and by extension, faster operations in mailboxes. And since you will be most likely archiving in real time, possibility to recover deleted messages if there's the need for that. Archiver also gives you detailed reporting through Mail Insights, which can give you all details of communications that are going on, from how much do the users cooperate with each other and with external senders, to whether they use some vulgarities in their emails and so on. There's also the option to enable legal lock, so you can select an individual archive and make it immutable in case there's the need for that. As for system requirements, it's not too bad. Just a 64-bit architecture Windows server. Minimum is 1 GB RAM. Recommended is 3 GB. Just note that it's what you have normally free, so it will be used by just Archiver. And for storage, the minimum that you need for installation is around 400 megabytes, but of course, the data will definitely keep growing in an archive if you use it properly. So it's good to have multiple drives ready and possibly hot swappable, so you can increase capacity as needed. It supports anything from Windows Small Business Server 2011 up, so Server 2012, including R2, to 2016 and 2019. And you can either connect it to Microsoft Exchange from 2010 and up, and you can also use it with Office 365, Carrier Connect, or Google Apps for Business. And if you use a different mail server, as long as it supports journaling and has an IMAP connection, then there should be no issue with using it. As for database needs, it comes pre-packed with Firebird database, but that is generally recommended just for testing or up to 25 users. Even then, I would suggest going to SQL Server Express, and Microsoft SQL Server is supported from 2005 and up. You will need .NET Framework 4.7 installed, including ASP.NET, Internet Information Services, so it can host the web interface, and of course a browser that can properly display the pages. If you want to use Active Directory for user authentication, it needs at least 2003 level, but at this point it should be around 2012 R2 or 2016, just to have everything working properly into the nearest future. And if you want to export directly to Exchange mailboxes or in Outlook formats, you will need Microsoft Exchange Server, MAPI client, and collaboration data objects, which is just a simple install. And last but not least, and we will go a little bit more in depth with this one is GFI Mail Essentials. It's a anti-spam gateway which will filter all the traffic. And first look at it is, well, why do I need an anti-spam? From statistics in 2019, which is getting a bit outdated by now, but more than half of all the email traffic was spam. And of course, spam brings multiple risks. There's lower productivity because users need to go through all their emails. And if it's twice as much emails, they won't have so much time to work on the important ones. And the main one is security risks. Up to 92% of malware is being spread through email. So it's good to get rid of it as soon as possible. There's also a risk of data leaks because phishing, and especially spear phishing, which is more targeted, is more and more prevalent, and it can easily lead to personal or company information leaks. And another question might be, why use an external anti-spam if I already have some anti-spam functionality on my mail server? So first, of course, would be the note that an external anti-spam is specialized and more likely to have more options and higher success rate in capturing spam messages. There's also higher security thanks to the fact that the traffic never even reaches the mail server if there's some malware. And mail server itself doesn't have a public IP access. It doesn't have the SMTP traffic routed to it. It's routed to the gateway instead. So just the routing provides you an advantage against a lot of types of attacks. You also spread the load this way, so mail server doesn't have to go through so much traffic, and you can also turn off some anti-spam features on the mail server. So there's the possibility to improve its performance. So let's look at the main advantages of GFI Mail Essentials. There's 4 antivirus engines, so they can cover each other's weaknesses in the detection, let's say. There's currently Avira, Bitdefender, Sophos, and Siren. And there's 14 different anti-spam filters which can protect you fairly well. All of them are highly configurable, so you can fine-tune them to get the best possible results. So first part of Mail Essentials is email security, and the main components are antivirus, information store protection for Exchange, Turan and executable scanner, email exploit engine, and HTML sanitizer. Of course, antivirus is the key part of malware blocking. It uses traditional signatures to detect it, but you have 4 different databases from 4 different vendors. So you are very unlikely to have any weak points in that part of your defense. And you can configure the order of scanning in which the antivirus engines will go through the email. So if you find out one of your engines has a higher capture rate than the rest, you can put it in first and save yourself some computational power. Next up is information store protection. It's usable only on MS Exchange, and it scans mailboxes and public folders at rest, not just in transit. So if there's any concepts with malware, let's say, then they can be discovered and neutralized. It uses either Exchange Web Services or, for older versions, VS API to access the folders, and you can schedule and customize the scans as you need. Next up is the Trojan and executable scanner. It scans all executable files for any unwanted behavior that might be present. You can set up which messages will be scanned and whether users and administrators will be notified if there's something malicious discovered. Then there's the email exploit engine, which blocks known exploits of client-side protocols like ActiveX, JavaScript, Java, and so on. So even when there is an issue that isn't patched yet, and it provides a possible vulnerability at the side of the client, it can still be stopped here. And you can set it for individual types of exploits. You can set up different block actions and, again, notifications. And the last part of the security is the HTML sanitizer. Again, it scans all the HTML code that's present in the message, and it can remove selectively any potentially harmful parts of it. But in case you have any issues with it, or you don't want to check some senders, you can add your own whitelist to it. Next big part is anti-spam. And again, just like with the antivirus engines, you can configure the order in which the filters will be applied. Some of the filters that are present are pretty self-explanatory, like SPF, so Sender Policy Framework, and anti-spoofing. Also, for example, gray list or language detection filter, but we'll look at most of the others. So first part is SpamRaiser. It's an automatic spam detection tool, and it's a big part of what Mail Essentials does. It blocks the bulk of the spam that's coming through, and it's got AI-assisted spam recognition, uses signatures of the emails combined with SPF and reputation checks. A very important part is anti-phishing. So it blocks phishing emails based on a database of known attackers and keywords used. But of course, if the database doesn't cover your language, or there's something new that isn't added to the database, you can customize the lists that will be checked with your own keywords and phrases. Then there's directory harvesting protection, which will block attacks of that kind. It checks the number of senders of recipients that's present, checks them against Active Directory or GFI directory, and if there's a certain number of invalid addresses, it won't send back an NDR, so it doesn't notify whether the usernames are valid or not. So it prevents brute force username extraction from your domain. Next up, there's 3 different kinds of block lists. There's email block list that you can add addresses or domains into, and it allows personal block lists for each user. You can have an IP block list, which contains either individual addresses or ranges that you will block. And then there's the IP and URI DNS block lists, which are internet databases that will be automatically checked whenever a new message comes. And there are things like Spamhaus, which you can add into it, although there are some default ones which are pretty good as well. Then there's header checking. So it goes through the SMTP headers and checks multiple parameters. It checks for empty sender, unusual fields, so anything non-standard, maximum amount of recipients, MIME and SMTP mismatch, invalid sender domains, numbers in email addresses, which often do appear in spam emails. And you can also block based on the content indicated in the header. So GIFs, remote content that needs to be downloaded, attachment spam, and so on. You can even block based on the character sets that are used. Next up is again a very configurable spam filter, that's spam keyword checking. You can check for presence of certain keywords in the message or for phrases. And you can have separate lists for header and for body. And you can add anything you need again. Next up is Bayesian filter. It's, as the name suggests, a self-improving filter. So it learns from messages that are tagged as spam, or if there's ever a false positive, the user can still access the email and tag it as not spam. Or if it just goes into their Outlook spam folder, they can use the spam tag plugin and give feedback to the Bayesian filter that way. After anti-spam, there's the last part, that's content filtering. Again, things like keyword filtering are self-explanatory. Settings are basically the same as for the previous things. There's also attachment filtering, decompression engine, and advanced content filtering. I will mention two of those. The decompression engine, which checks contents of archives, either zips, RAR, and so on. And it can be filtered by different parameters, whether it's password protected, damaged, or for example, a recursive archive. So there's a package within package within package. And you can also check the file size and file count. Then there's the filter that's named advanced content filtering. It's a regex search-based filter, so you can use regular expressions, define your own. By default, there's just a rule for credit cards and social security numbers, which are in the US format, but you can add almost anything. The regex filtering is very versatile, and if you don't find the options you need to block some kind of spam in any of the previous filter, this one will definitely help you. So if there are any questions, you can send them into chat. We will give you a minute for that if you are interested about anything we've mentioned.
Yeah, great, great. Thank you, Ondra. Thank you, Joseph. I see no questions. And I have one funny observation that this is the first time in those 3 days sessions that we have that number of participants increasing during the session, not the decreasing. So that's the funny situation in this moment. So I see no questions in this moment. So I will